Test, test, test. This is about MS Dhoni, I swear. But just before we get to him, years ago I heard this story about this council that kept buying too much tar for their roads. They couldn't work it out. They had done the sums, bought the exact amount that they had before, but for some reason now they always had such an excess. Usually the drivers would drop pretty much the same amount no matter what the road looked like. And then the ground crew would come in and flatten it out to make it all work. But they found out that one of their drivers was actually dropping what he thought was the right amount based on whether there was a dip or a flat bit of road or a hill. And it turned out that he was incredible at being able to pick just the right amount over and over again. Because of that, he saved the council a lot of tar and he ended up making himself pretty in demand with other councils. There are people out there who just see things differently to most of us. MS Dhoni is one of those. And a lot of that comes out at the end of T20 innings. Yes, we're going to talk about what he did to Mumbai the other night. But first, it's worth putting it into context. Dhoni currently has the second most runs in the last 4 overs of T20 matches. Only Kieron Pollard has scored more there. This is an awful lot of runs. Yeah. But in terms of average, he also has the 4th best. It makes him one of 6 players with over 1,000 runs at the death with an average of better than 30. I think these numbers alone show what an absolute expert he is. But he has just been there so many times. And it's become his main role in the side. And it's why he's known as a closer or a finisher or whatever term it is that you and your friends use. But he wasn't the first. Before him, Michael Bevan was doing it in one-day internationals. But before we dive too deep into Michael Bevan, it's worth explaining how T20 matches are chased. There's essentially 3 methods. Just normal batting while looking at the run rate. Then there is the break the chase method. And then there is, I suppose, the Bevan or Dhoni method of taking the game deep. That's probably a bit of an oversimplification, but you get my overall point. Most of the best chasers are people who break it early on. Here are the 4 players with over 50 not outs and wins and over 30 in losses. The 3 who try and break it have fewer not outs and losses. That doesn't mean that they're better chasers or worse chasers. It simply means that they're out more often in games that they lost when their team was batting second, because they press harder to win earlier. I think for most players this is the best way to try and win. But this takes us back to Michael Bevan. This is not at all how he did it. And he has the 2nd most not outs in ODI cricket history. I wonder who number 1 is. Bevan was not out 30 times for Australia in ODIs when they were chasing. Australia won 26 of those. Dhoni was not out in 52nd innings when India was chasing, and India won 47 of those. Essentially, whether he knew it or not, Dhoni took Bevan's method and he bettered it. And then he hacked it for T20 cricket. And how did they both do it? By slowing down. Bevan averaged 5 runs more in the 2nd innings. Dhoni was pretty much the same with his average. But their drops in strike rate are strikingly similar. This is a method that both of them use. And Dhoni does the same thing in T20 cricket. It's not a massive slowdown, but it's very clear that this is part of the plan. And they do have a plan. And a lot of thinking has gone into the way both of them bat. Bevan recently tweeted out the basic concepts. It's more about what the overall team does and not just him specifically. But what I've done is I've taken some of Bevan's thoughts and also added to it to show just how these 2 players chase. Dhoni, of course, has added power that Bevan didn't really need that often. But even with that extra power that Dhoni has, the methods are pretty much similar. This is the Bevan-Dhoni road to the last over method. Or just the Dhoni one. I don't know, whatever we use in the title. So let's really break it down by starting at the beginning. Bevan talks about his scoring options for each pitch, match situation, bowler, fielding position, and your strengths. That's already a lot. Most batters are just playing to their strengths naturally, but he has that last on his list, and therefore he is crunching a lot of information each ball in order to get the most out of it. He's waiting for balls to fall into his areas so he can hit them into his zones, which is everywhere from backward square leg to mid-off. If the ball goes somewhere else, it's either a mistake or he had no option. But early on, he will wait. Now let's look at let the others swing. We actually need to go back a little bit here to be able to understand exactly what Dhoni did. Let's go back to the last delivery of the 15th over, which was Dhoni's first. The run rate was just over 10 at this point. After 6 balls, Dhoni had knocked a single from each delivery and also collected 1 wide from Bumrah. And the rate had gone from around 10 at over to more than 14. At this stage, Dhoni hadn't even tried to hit a boundary. Instead, that falls on the next man in, Dwayne Pretorius. Compared to Dhoni, he is much more of a expendable asset. Pretorius actually usually bats fairly high. His most common batting spots have really been between 4 and number 6, but in this kind of team it makes a lot more sense for him to bat between 6 and number 8. But it shows he's certainly more of an all-rounder and less of a bowler who just hits. And he has had some good years, like 2019 where he averaged 33 and struck at 147. But in 2021 he averaged 8 and struck at 104. In fact, the deeper you look into Pretorius' batting, the less sense it makes. It's kind of all over the shop. He can be good and he can bat up the order. But I really think in a perfect team, he'd be a disposable number 8 who would only bat high on certain days. In this case, Chennai obviously need him to go hard, and he does that, taking a 6 off Untitled. Dhoni doesn't play his first boundary attempt until the 7th ball, and he ends up getting an edge and taking a 4. But because of that boundary, they also kept themselves at the 14 that were needed. For the 19th over, Dhoni makes 1 run off the ball he can reach. He does try and hit a boundary, but it's Pretorius who actually gets 2 falls away from Jasprit Bumrah to go with his 6 in the previous over. He's clearly swinging harder earlier than Dhoni has. And I can show you one-day games where I saw Bevan do the exact same thing. In this 2003 World Cup game, Bevan went incredibly slow in the chase, but allowed Andy Bichel to hit out, knowing that at least Bevan would still be out there if Bichel was out. This is a fairly common tactic that both of them use a lot, and that links directly to just staying in. Other faster batters are deciding if it is worth them taking more risks in T20 to end the chase. Dhoni prefers to bat longer. Bevan was not out in over a third of his ODI innings. In fact, getting him out became the challenge because if he stayed in long enough, he'd find a way to make the chase close or the total high. And both of these players do actually bat slower in those chase innings, which puts pressure on the others to score more boundaries. Or to look at it another way, allows everyone else to swing hard and bring the chase closer, knowing that these two won't be dismissed, almost like an insurance policy. But I want to show you something. This is Dhoni in the first innings versus the average strike rate of all IPL batters by the last 4 overs. You can see that he starts off just a run quicker than the others in the 17th over, and then by the end he's more than 2 runs an over faster. And that makes sense because he's a far better death batter than most players are. But here's where it gets fun. In the second innings, he starts half a run slower than the IPL average. And just look at this ramp up. By the end, he's scoring at over 15 runs and over. The 19th over, he's still slower than he is in the first innings. And he manages to add 5.5 runs in total just at the end here. I mean, he goes so fast that he almost doubles his runs per over from the 17th. I'm not sure you ever get a much better representation of how much different Dhoni is from the first to the second innings than this. But the next one is waiting for your ball. Remember, as Dhoni needed 16 from 4, he'd already faced 9 deliveries, but he'd only attacked 2 of them. This is the first ball he faced of the last over, and Untitled goes for a wide full Yorker. He gets it too straight and not full enough, and Dhoni destroys it down the ground. His only other boundary at this point was also to Untitled, another wide full delivery. That's not an accident, that's what he wanted. There is also a matchup element here. In this game, it would have been very obvious for reasons I'll talk about in a moment. But let's start with the 2 bowlers Dhoni was going to be facing. Jasprit Bumrah is one of the best death bowlers in IPL history. The only fast bowlers with a better economy at the death are Lasith Malinga and Chris Morris. Untitled is one of the worst, and on economy, he is actually the biggest leaker of runs per over. But because Dhoni has been around so long, Untitled and Bumrah have actually bowled to him a lot. Bumrah 59 balls in the IPL, Untitled 43. This may not sound like a lot, but for someone who usually bats at the death, this is actually quite a bit of data to go on. And in both cases, most of these balls are in the last 4 overs, where Bumrah is near best and Untitled near worst. Usually Dhoni just knocks singles off Bumrah. He's actually one of the only seamers that actually does bother him. And Untitled, well, you see this far off dot at the bad end with a strike rate of well over 2 runs a ball? Yeah, sadly, that's him. Dhoni would have factored this in. In the end, just because of how the over went, he only faced a single ball from Bumrah. Well, 2 if you count the wide. But he would never have been his target. He knew who his guy was. And they also would have known exactly when Bumrah was going to bowl. Because the 19th over in a chase is usually where you use your best death bowler. Teams believe they can create enough pressure to win the game at the end with an inferior bowler. And they don't want their best bowler to not use up all of their deliveries. Bumrah has only delivered 1 final available over of a match in the last 3 years, compared to 13 in the 19th. All time he has 12 last overs of a chase, probably some of those came when he played with Malinga, compared to 39 19th overs. So Dhoni would have just known that Bumrah was definitely going to bowl in the 19th. And this is because it makes cricket sense. and because he has played against Bumrah a lot. Plus, of course, he's just out there thinking the entire time. He has turned limited overs into a noble equation. Put it this way, if you need 26 off 10, it can be overwhelming to see that on the scoreboard. But what many modern batters think is how many boundaries they could score off those 10 balls. They know that they'll get roughly run a ball, maybe slightly higher if they're lucky, off the remaining deliveries. 2 sixes and 2 fours is 20, and you only need a single ball from there on through. And a lot of that thinking originally came from people like Bevan. However, for this particular case against Mumbai, Dhoni would have looked at it and realised he needed 3 boundaries and 4 balls. That's a little different. But there was something else that actually helped in this. After the 6th that Dhoni scored, Untitled dropped short to surprise Dhoni with a slower ball bouncer. It almost worked, but Dhoni got enough bat on it to beat short fine leg. It was probably not exactly where he wanted to hit it, but he threw enough at it to clear the fielder. Then the umpire reported that as the 1 bouncer for the over. That meant that Dhoni had 2 balls left to face and only 6 runs required. But more importantly, he knew that there probably wouldn't be another short ball coming. So one of Untitled options was taken away, because if he bowled it, he might be called for a free hit. Dhoni has always shown excellent ball counting skills. He's also very good at respecting the good deliveries, but also trying to turn them into 2s. You will get good balls at the death, it is part of the gig. What Bevan and Dhoni do to handle that is respect the good balls, because trying to hit a boundary off a very good delivery increases your risk of being dismissed. So they have places where they want to hit a very good Yorker, and then they run like hell. This is going to sound weird, but not all players think of running hard, because many are so focused on boundaries that it doesn't even occur to them. Both Dhoni and Bevan are fast, good at placing the ball and push hard. And a 2 in T20 is a win. You can move the field, open up new gaps, and 2 runs a ball is actually really handy. And then we have the last over, which is something almost completely different from all other parts of cricket. It's also where you want to be if you believe that you're a better player than others. You know that you can just repeat your high level of skills there. And in this game between Chennai and Mumbai, you have one of the best death players in the IPL going up against one of the worst. But this ball is actually a half volley, one that Pretorius had been hitting pretty well earlier to the leg side. He just missed it. Those are the things that sometimes happen at the death. The ball to Bravo is another missed Yorker, but it's a little bit down the leg side and it cramps him up a little bit, and to a new batter it was hard to get under, and so Bravo could only get a single, which is what brings Dhoni on strike. We then get the 2 Dhoni boundaries. The first is a mistake from Untitled that Dhoni punishes massively, and the second was a solid idea, and Dhoni played it fairly well and got a little bit lucky. The third ball is where his placement and patience and running come in. From the moment he decides this isn't a ball to hit to the boundary, that allows him to find the gap and come back for that second. This is a little bit like an escape valve. And then all he has to do is hope that the last ball is an error. In this case, it is. It's a low full toss at him, and he helps it away to fine leg. That is actually where Pretorius had hit some previous boundaries. Dhoni probably had that as a boundary option from the start, but Untitled giving him such an easy delivery just helped him more. If this had been a perfect delivery, Dhoni probably loses, and that's okay, because he has controlled all he can. If he loses, he loses. There is always another game. It isn't life or death for him, because in a few days he'll come back. That's the professional mindset he's always had. It allows him to keep balanced and not get too emotional when he's doing these chases. And while people talk about his composure a lot, I think there's a very important reason why he is so composed. Obviously, he's a balanced professional athlete. Not all cricketers are. But also, the stats show that Dhoni is better in the first innings at the death than the second. So he is already a great player in that period of the game, regardless of the chase. That he changes his method for the chase shows that he does see things slightly different than other players. But his skills are the most important thing, and he has them and he backs them. And then you've got his own personal pragmatism. I have been to a lot of Dhoni press conferences over the years, and his ability to state why a team won or lost is so honest and process driven. And remember that stat from earlier. Dhoni is actually not out in a lot of losses. He knows he will win a lot, but he also knows he will lose a lot. In basketball, people remember Michael Jordan for all those clutch shots he hit, but he also missed quite a few.
26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed.
In fact, while I was writing this, Chennai were playing against Punjab. And do you know what happened? Chennai lost the chase. MS Dhoni was out there and he threatened a victory, but he chose the wrong ball to try and hit, and he was caught out at mid-wicket, and it was over. He's lost a lot of chases. It's a bit like the guy in the Rhodes before. They both would have made a lot of errors, But because their skills are so good, they don't fail as much as other people. Dhoni might have had success trying another method, but this works and suits for how he looks at the game. And most players don't do this because they aren't the same kind of player. Breaking the chase earlier or having two players attacking at once usually makes more sense. But there is only one Dhoni, like there was only one Bevan. And they chase their way, take the game deep, and ultimately back themselves to be better. That is the road they have chosen to be successful in chases. 99.94 is my new venture. It is Cricket's Conversation. We are looking for people to sign up to our beta launch at the moment. And if you want more information about what it is, just click on the 99.94 logo and head over to the site. At 99.94, we talk cricket.